2000 Honda Odyssey transmission replacement. I'm Brian Esser from How To Automotive, and I'm going to walk you through that process. To get started, I'm going to rack her up, put the car in neutral if it's possible, if your car, depending on how your transmission is broken. So after getting her racked up, I'm going to start on the top and disconnect as much as I can from the top first. So I'm going to start by removing the airbox assembly, including all the ducting here. Remove the battery and battery tray. So I'm going to start by removing all the bolts here and the hose clamps, and then pull the clamps off here. And anything that's attached to it like this, I'll just pop them off and disconnect. Okay, now that the air cleaner's out and the battery's out, I want to remove the tray. And there's a bolt that's straight down there, and then right here on the frame there's another bolt. And I'm also going to take this little bracket off. It's held on by a 10mm here, and then there's a bolt right here, and then also just like this bolt here, there's one on the opposite side over here. We'll have to get that from, we'll have to lift the car up and get that from underneath. So we'll do all that and take the battery tray out. So I got the car up in the air to get to the bottom bolts for the battery tray. Then I need to remove these shields in the tires. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now. Go ahead and remove the tires on both sides. Go ahead and remove the under shields and pop all that stuff off. So we're gonna remove all the clips that hold the shields on. And I like to use a little tool that looks like this and just kind of pinches in here. Go ahead and pop those off, and there's gonna be a bunch that goes all the way around the cover. So go ahead and take them all out. So after getting the shield off, you can see up here there's the bottom of the bolt for the battery tray. And then if you come through on this side where the and look up over here, here's the other bolt for the battery tray. So go ahead and remove both of those, and then your whole tray will come out, and then we'll lower the car back. So now that you got your battery tray out, as you can see, they got these little ears on here, and those were holding the wire looms on. So go ahead, they have a little squeeze tab on the back. You just kind of squeeze it up or pull it and then slide them off. So after you get that out, we're going to tackle the starter next. And to do that, we're going to pull the battery cable that goes to it off, and then the little starter, the wire here, and a couple 17mm bolts that hold it on, and then go ahead and just remove it from the car. And I also wanted to tell you is like you're gonna have lots and lots of bolts and stuff when you do a job like this large. So what I like to do is, as I take them out, I like to keep them together all together. So I'll put the bolts with it. So I know these bolts go only to this battery tray, and then I also have a ton of magnetic trays. Kind of like this one here, I have 5 or 6 of these, and I'll use these also to help keep track of bolts and stuff. And sometimes I use little cardboard boxes, whatever it takes to keep everything organized. And if cardboard boxes, like little ones, work great, because then you can write on them. You know, this went to the starter, this went to the alternator, whatever you're taking out. You know. You can write little notes on them. It's pretty cool too. Now that you got the starter out, I like to keep all the bolts with it, so I know exactly, you know, keeps things in order. So go ahead and set that aside. So now what I'm going to do is focus on is getting everything that's attached to the transmission, like the ground cable here. So I'm going to take the brackets off, and see these electrical looms right here can be kind of a pain in the butt. So if you got a couple of them attached to the brackets, I go ahead and take the brackets off. We're probably gonna have to transfer this stuff over anyways, so go ahead and take the 10s off. And then what I do after I take the brackets off, I kind of just screw the bolts back into the spots where they came out of, and that way when I got the transmission back in, I know exactly this bolt went to this exact perch, and I can transfer it over later. So we're just going to disconnect all the wiring harnesses, and we'll leave all the solenoids and stuff still plugged into the transmission. Just unplug the electrical connectors, and if they have little brackets like this, take those off. And you can go ahead and put a bucket underneath the car and remove the transmission cooler lines, these two here. And down below, underneath the starter was some more solenoid packs. Just go ahead and unplug them. So I'm starting down below, and I'm taking out all the, like I said, I leave all the wire looms hooked to the brackets. It's easier just to take the bolts out of the brackets. and they're going to have these long bolts like this going through. So there's going to be one here, and one about here. Just go ahead and take them all out. And what that does is it allows you to lift the wiring harness up and off, and unplug anything you see that's connected to sensors or anything. Just go ahead and unplug them. And as you can see, like this one little earlet is hooked to this bracket. That one I may just take this off, but and then so you're gonna work your way. What I like to do is work my way from closest to the front of the radiator and work my way around to the back. And then once you're comfortable that you've got everything unplugged from the top of the transmission that's attached to the transmission, then what we're gonna do is the main bolts that go through the bell housing in the very back closest to the engine block here. And let's see there, you can see one there underneath the boot. There are going to be 17mm bolts. What you're going to do is you're going to start from the left side and work your way over the bell housing and remove all the bolts. And there'll be a couple on the bottom that we'll remove later after we get the car in the air. The goal is to not have to revisit this until the transmission's back in the car. So we're going to unplug everything. Just take your time to make sure everything's unplugged. There's sensors and coils underneath the thermostat housing. Make sure you unplug all that stuff. And then this main wire loom is bolted down. So you want to make sure you get everything unbolted. And you don't have to worry about the connectors. They only plug into one thing. You can't mix them up. So and you can kind of see how the wiring harness lays. So when you go to put this back together, each individual plug only fits one thing at a time. So after unhooking everything and, that I think it's in the way or attached to the transmission, I took a tie strap and ran it underneath the wiring harness here and just pulled it up and then pulled the wiring harness all the way up as high as I can get it. That way it's out of your way when you go to pull the transmission out of the car. So now that I'm confident everything on the top is unbolted and unplugged, now I'm going to lift the vehicle up and work from the bottom and start removing axles and stuff like that. So we're going to raise the vehicle up now. So now that we got the car up in the air, you want to remove the drain plug from the transmission and drain the tranny fluid. And then while that's draining, we're going to do a lot of things here. We're going to need to get this whole subframe assembly out. So what we need to do is start by removing the ball joints from the spindles here. So we're going to take the cotter pins out, take the nuts out, and do that on both sides. So to get the ball joints free, what I did was took the cotter pins out, took the bolts off, backed the bolts off, and left them threaded on there. And I struck the spindle right here with a hammer, a large hammer. And when you hit it like that, it vibrates it and pops the ball joint free. And you can now that it's free from the spindle, take the nut off and go ahead and separate that. So now that I got the ball joints popped free, as you can see here, I'm going to turn my focus to we need to remove the exhaust so we can get the frame out. So what we're going to do is we're going to separate the exhaust right here at the beginning of the cat, and then above we're going to take the 3 bolts out to the manifold over here and the 3 bolts in the front to hold the manifold here. And we're also going to unplug our oxygen sensors upstream and downstream. Drop the exhaust out, and you have to order new gaskets when you do this. So now that the exhaust is out of the way, what we need to do is we need to do 2 things. We need to lower the car back down, and on this motor mount here there's a bolt that's right on the very top, just 1 bolt. We need to remove that, so we're going to lower the car back down. Then after we get the car back up in the air, we're going to remove this plate that's on the back of the oil pan here. It's held on with a couple tins. So the one nut that we need to get to on the motor mount is right here. And go ahead and remove that. It's a 17mm, and then we'll lift the car back up. So now that we got the cover off, we need to remove the flywheel bolts. So we'll remove the tin, and then after we get that bolt out, you'll take your ratchet and crank the crank around, and you'll rotate the engine until the next bolt lines up, and you keep rotating it around and removing the bolts until there's no more bolts left. So after getting the flex plate bolts out, go ahead and remove the 2 bolts that are in the end of the the oil pan that goes into the transmission. Go ahead and remove that. And once you get that out, then we're going to take a pole jack, like so, with a block of wood, and we're going to put it right here under the oil pan. So now that we got our pole jack underneath our oil pan with a block of wood, what we're going to do is switch our focus to getting this subframe out. So as you can see, the shift cable is in the way, and it's also we have to disconnect it. So disconnect the shift cable next. To get the shift cable off, you have to take this cover off. It's held on by 3 12mm bolts and the 2 bolts on the end. Once you get the cover off and set aside, then right here at the end of the cable here, it's a 10mm bolt, but it has these little flare. You have to bend these little tabs up that help prevent the bolt from backing out. So bend those up, and then take the 10mm bolt, and then the whole shift cable will slide off. Okay, so now that the shift cable is off, what we want to do is turn our focus to, we got to unbolt the rack and pinion that's bolted to the subframe. So the way I like to do that is actually I'm going to take the motor mounts over here. I'm going to take the 4 bolts to hold the motor mount out, and then I'm going to take on the driver's side through these holes, there's 2 bolts to hold the transmission mounts. So they hold these mounts. So take those out, and then after you get all the mounts off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen up all 4 corners of the subframe. So I'm going to take the bolt out here and loosen this up, but don't take it out, just drop it. And I'll do that on all 4 corners. And what that does is it drops the subframe down a little bit, and I keep my engine here hoisted up, and then there's a mount up top on the right side that holds the nose of the engine in. So that way, what it does is it drops the frame down a little bit, gives you a little bit of room to get to some of the bolts. Like one of the bolts we got to get to is this bolt here for the rack and pinion, and it's on the passenger side, and it's right here. So that'll drop down a little bit, and that'll give us a little room to work. So I'll walk you through. So I took the brackets loose on all 4 corners, like I told you, and dropped the subframe down a little bit. And what I did is back here is I removed the bolts for the rack and pinion. There's 2 of them that go, one here and one here. And then on the back there's a line that's mounted to the rack and pinion. I went ahead and took the support bracket out here. And then there's also this little L bracket that goes on top of the rack and pinion. And it goes kind of like this. So I took that bracket off, a couple 14mm bolts. Took that bracket off, and on the opposite side of the subframe, there's another bracket like that. I just loosened it and swung the bolt out of the way. So now the rack and pinion itself is hanging, but it's free. So now I'm going to work my way around, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to remove these 2 bolts here to hold the rack and pinion to the subframe, and then this line that's right here, it's got a few clips that are mounted onto the frame. I'll take those clips out, and then after all that's done, the subframe, I can go ahead and finish lowering the rest of the bolts out. You'll have to have somebody help you, or use a tranny jack or floor jacks or pole jacks, and go ahead and remove all the bolts, and then you can lower the whole frame down, and you'll lower it straight over your subframe that's on the ground here. You'll just lower it straight down. I'm about to come out, and so you want to also remove the sway bar link ends, and just go ahead and put the nuts back on them. And then also on this line here that goes to the power steering rack, the pressure hose, it's going to have a few mounting spots. You have to take a couple 10mm belts to hold that. So once you get that all out, as you can see, it's pretty much free and just kind of hanging here. And you get some co-workers to help you lower it down. So now that we got the subframe down and on the ground, I'll give you a look around at all the stuff that we disconnected. So the motor mounts on the end, the rack and pinion, as you can see. So they got the bolts, the motor mounts, the little brackets that hold the hose, the power steering hose on, and the brackets to hold the power steering line, the cooler lines on. And then also, one thing I didn't mention is there's a vacuum line that goes to the bottom of the motor mount. You'll have to remove that too. So once you got the subframe out, Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn our focus to getting the axles out. And getting the axles out of the car, and then once we get the axles out of the car, we'll position our tranny jack underneath it, and we'll remove the final bolts of the transmission, and we'll drop her out of the car. So as you can see, the subframe's here, and we got a pole jack in the middle of it. It's kind of in our way. So what I'm going to do is just swing it around like that, and then we'll swing our tranny jack. It'll fit directly right under it, and there's just enough room to put the tranny jack here and remove the transmission. To get the axles out, there was a nut here. You just remove the axle nut, and then there's 3 bolts here that held the bracket on the middle, on the passenger side mount. Take those 3 bolts out, and then just slide the axle out. And then on the driver's side, you just took the axle nut off and push the spindle out of your way like that, and pull the axle out, and then a pry bar between the transmission and the axle, and pop it out, and then set those aside. Okay, now we're going to remove the last remaining bolts. As you can see, the 2, they're going this way, so that towards the passenger side or driver's side. So you're going to remove the bolt here, and the bolt here, and then you're going to work your way around, and then the bottom bolt on the right here, you're going to remove that bolt, and then after that you're going to put a pry bar between and kind of pry the transmission separate from the engine. And once it's pried off the engine, once it's pried from the engine, then you can slowly lower your tranny jack down and pry it, keep moving it towards the driver's side of the car. And as you do, it'll get really close to the frame here, so get it up close to it, and then lower it down, and then you can pull it over even further once you clear the frame. And once you get past that, you should be able to clear the torque converter, and everything should be clear of the engine, and you should be able to lower the whole tranny down out of the car and set it down. And you're definitely going to want to have a couple helpers, or at least one helper, help you hold the transmission onto the jack and maneuver everything out. So now that we got the tranny out of the car, what you want to do is get your new tranny side by side, and you want to transfer over any brackets or anything that may be on the old one that's not on the new one, such as the motor mounts on the bottom here. Go ahead and transfer those over to your new one, and then you also want to flush out the transmission cooler that's on the radiator. So one of the easiest ways to do it is to get a bucket, drain bucket, put it underneath, and then you take one line of the radiator, you could take an air blower and blow it in there, blow it through, and it blows the fluid out. And then what you can do is you could take some brake clean parts washer and spray it in the hose, up in the hose, and then use the air blower and blow it back through, and do that several times until nothing pretty much comes out of the one end of the hose here, and or just clear fluid comes out, and then you're done flushing the radiator. So after transferring all the parts that went on the old transmission that didn't come with the new transmission over, like mine didn't come with the neutral safety switch, so I switched that over. Yours may or may not come with that, depending on where you get your transmission from. So, and then what you do after that is you go ahead and stab it back into the onto the back of the engine, and start the bolts that were on the back side here, and then on the opposite side over here. And all you do is there's a couple dowels on there that and the dowels pins go into the transmission. So once you get those lined up and pushed in, then you start your bolts. One bolt on the front of the car towards the radiator went from this way, and the other 2 went from this way. So once you got those all started up, now so the next step is to stab our axles, both left and right axles, and put them back through the spindles. Okay, so now that the axles are stabbed on both sides and rebolted up on the brackets, the mounts and stuff, all bolted in, now it's time to put the subframe back in. So when you do is you're gonna have to have helpers lift it up and put it in place. And I like to start on the passenger side, like this corner here. So I'll start this bolt here on the corner of the frame right here. Go ahead and start that one, and then I'll start the back one. And once I got them started by hand, then I'll use the transmission jack, and I'll lift the frame up. And at the same time, you got to line up all these little motor mounts and stuff like that, and you kind of want to get the rack and pinion in place. So what you do is you start all four corners, get all four corners started, and leave it loose, and then you bolt your rack up. And once you got your rack bolted up, then you can and all the little brackets and stuff that went on in the back here, get all those bolted up first and tight, and then you can run the subframe up, and then you can start your engine mounts bolts onto the subframe. And you're going to use this pole jack to either lift it up a little bit, lower it down a little bit, and the engine has a little bit of play left or right to maneuver things around. So you want to kind of leave it, just start all the bolts, and once you get it all started, then you go back around and torque everything down. So now I got all four corners. The bolts are just started, as you can see, but they're hanging. The frame is hanging down, and I got the engine jacked up with the pole jack. So now what you could do is the motor mounts have a little bit of play, and when you're starting that, you also want to make sure you line up this motor mount. That's pretty crucial to get this one started evenly. So now you can lower the engine down and jack this up and kind of maneuver it however you need to do it to get them all to line up. And then once you get it lined up, then you can reposition your rack and pinion into place and start all the bolts. And once you get all the bolts pretty much started in the back here on the rack, you're pretty much home free. Then you can tighten all the rack, and then you can pull the frame up to the body and suck it down, and then you can torque it down. Okay, after getting the rack and pinion all torqued back down, and all the little brackets that held the lines on all the way around, you know, all the clips, all that's all bolted back up. These bolts are still loose on the corners. So what I'm going to do is, one at a time, I'm going to take it back out, and I'm going to put a little dab of thread sealer Loctite on the threads. Then I'll run this one back up, and then I'm also going to put it on the bolts that went on the corners here. And then I'll run it back up, and I'll torque it down. The big bolts are 76 pounds, and the smaller bolts are 54 foot-pounds. So run it up, and then once I get them all run up, I'll torque them all down. So now that the subframe is all bolted up, go ahead and bolt your ball joints up, tighten them down, and put your cotter pins in. Your sway bar link ends, go ahead and bolt those down, tighten those up. Go ahead and put your axle nuts on and tighten those down, and pin the indention in on both sides. And after that, now you can put on your shift cable. So you put your shift cable back on, and once that's back on and bolted back up, so next is to bolt up the flywheel, or the flex plate, I'm sorry. You want to put a little blue Loctite on the threads of and start those and tighten those down. I tried looking up the specs for the torque, and I couldn't find it, so just run them down and tighten them up pretty good. They are 10 millimeter bolts, so you don't need to over tighten them. So after getting the flex plate torqued down, go ahead and start the bolts here to go through the oil pan into the transmission, and put the cover plate back on. And then after that, we're going to put our exhaust back on. We'll change the gaskets out and put our exhaust back in, and plug our O2 sensors back in. Okay, after getting your exhaust bolted back in and your oxygen sensors plugged back in and routed back into the little brackets, now you can take the transmission mounts that are here in the front and in the back here, and go ahead and start the bolts and tighten those down. And after that, just basically do a double check around, look around, make sure you didn't forget anything. And if everything looks good, you put your wheels on and lower the vehicle down. You don't want to put the shield back on just yet, because we still got to put the battery tray back in the car. So now that I got the car back down, I'm going to go ahead and put the starter in, and also start go ahead and put the two main bolts that went in the top of the bell housing, put those back in and tighten those down. After that, I'm going to take my wiring harness back off and lay it back down, and start plugging everything in that I touched back in, and plug all the sensors back in, and any of the brackets that I took off, I'm going to put those back on now. So after getting the starter in, the So after getting the starter bolted up, and the two mounts bolted up, I went ahead and laid the wiring harness down and started at the bottom with the 2 solenoids underneath the starter here. Plugged them in and just worked my way, bolting all the brackets up, plugging everything in from this side of the transmission, and worked my way around to the back of the transmission. I also went ahead and started my my nut that went to the one motor mount there and tightened that down. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to remove this plug right here. We're going to fill the transmission up with transmission fluid. I also now is a good time to reinstall your transmission cooler lines, and then you're going to fill up the transmission. Just start by, I don't know how full, or if some transmissions come with fluid, some don't. Mine came pretty empty. I don't know if it has any in the torque bit or not. So I'm just going to start by putting about 3 quarts in. Basically, that's what you would do if you were to drain and fill. I'll put 3 quarts in, and then I'll check it. On Hondas, you check them with the engine not running. So basically, I just want it to be reading on the stick a little bit. I don't necessarily need it full just yet, because once I get it fully put back together, I'll do my final top off. So on the paperwork on my transmission, it said it came dry, and it said it holds up to like 7 quarts of transmission fluid. And the transmission fluid you want to use is the Honda DW1 ATF transmission fluid. So I put in, like, you know, yours, it's going to be case by case, depending on, some transmissions come with some fluid in it, and some come partially filled, and some come completely dry. After you get the fluid in, go ahead and reinstall your battery tray and any wiring brackets that you may have taken off, and all the, like, the looms attached to the battery tray and stuff. Go ahead and reattach all that stuff. You need to put your battery in, and then after that you can put your air cleaner on and your lower shield. So now that we got all the covers back on, the air cleaner back on, what we're going to do is we're going to start the car, let it run for a few minutes, or a minute or so, turn off the car. And we're also going to shift it through the gears, you know, all the gears from low all the way back up to park, and then turn the car off and recheck our fluid. And once our fluid's in the ballpark, we're going to test drive it. If it's over full for some reason, you can lift it back up and drain a little bit out from the drain plug, and then go for a test drive. After you get back from your test drive, recheck your fluid levels again, and that pretty much completes the R&R of a transmission on a 2001 Honda Odyssey. I'm Brian Esslick from How To Automotive, and as always, it's my pleasure sharing my experience with you, and encourage you to subscribe for more valuable videos like this. Thank you.